Hey people, welcome to the channel, and in this case talking about the shotgun as a potential survival gun. Maybe a bug out bag gun, maybe a survival gun, home defense gun. What is it that it does? What role can you expect from it? And does it make sense or not? What are the pros and cons of this firearm, of this tool? Now, this is something that I've talked already so many times, and there's a ton of content out there. You probably have an idea, but in this video, I hope to maybe throw a few more concepts, a few potential applications, some roles, and some pros and cons that you haven't considered before. So let's talk about this. As always, if you enjoy the content, do subscribe to the channel. That's always much appreciated. If you like what I do here and you want to learn more, I always recommend my books, Surviving the Economic Collapse and Street Survival Skills. These are things that I've learned over the years, not just my personal first-hand experience of going through an economic collapse, but many years of actual training, learning, taking classes, having lived in different places, and doing this as my profession. This is what I do. It's a lot of time invested, a lot of time into learning from all of these things that I've condensed into my work, into the books that I publish. You have those available in Amazon following the links below. Now, one of the things that you do learn, especially for example in a defensive shooting class, you probably took one with a pistol shooting. Well, not so many people have taken defensive shotgun shooting classes. I have. That was fun. And you learn a bunch of things. Well, one of the first things you learn is that your shotgun constantly needs to be fed with these things, right? And that is a skill. That is something that you can learn. You can become quite good. But it's one of the things that you maybe don't have to worry all that much when you go with a semi-automatic carbine, something that has a larger magazine. Those are little things that you learn when taking these classes, right? You're constantly feeding the gun. That's nice. Now, when it comes to survival and preparedness, what is it that you plan to use your shotgun for? What is it that you plan to use this tool for? What about my bug out bag? I have my bug out bag over there. I have to bug out. All right, I'm picking up my one and only survival tool for this potential role, and that's this shotgun. That's the only gun I have, my shotgun. Well, that kind of sucks because the shotgun is, well, quite large, quite heavy. There's a certain volume to it, and it's not nearly as concealable as a handgun. That's something that I've addressed already in other videos of this series. And yes, the handgun, a Glock pistol, that is super easy to conceal. You can carry it concealed if you have the proper license, if that's required where you live. Depending on the legislation, it may just be the case that you only need to keep it in a case or box with the ammunition apart. And you can just throw it in a backpack. You'll have the gun with you. If you need to get it ready to be used, then at least it is there. Not so much the case here, at least not if you want to keep that out of sight. Out of sight means out of mind, so that's a big deal when things are getting complicated out there. This is one of the big disadvantages in general from any long gun that you have. Now, I will say there are certain very short shotguns. I actually have one 14-inch barrel, and there's even shorter with pistol grips. Is that really all that practical and useful? I would go with a Glock instead of that thing. I mean, I came close, very close actually, to buying one just for fun. It looks like something out of GTA, right, from a video game. But it's not really all that practical. The accuracy suffers if you don't have stock. You have just half a shotgun in many aspects. So it is cool, and it's still not as concealable as a proper pistol. So in terms of concealment, of being there when you need it, that is a big disadvantage that it has. Now, on the other hand, it has a lot of power. It is quite versatile. This is a Mossberg 500. You see these things everywhere. And one of the things I can tell you based on my own life experience, having lived in different places, having owned guns in different places, having done a bunch of training, is that one of the cool things is anywhere in the world where you drop me with a few $100 and the proper permits or license, I can go and get myself one of these things. I've owned these things in different countries. I don't really give much of a damn if it's from one or the other. It's still a Mossberg 500. If I'm buying it in London and it has a 24-inch barrel because that's the minimum length that the legislation allows, well, I go with the long barrel, with the long ass Mossberg. I actually enjoy, I still have it, and I enjoy the longer sight radius. It is super accurate with slugs, basically mostly because of that longer sight radius. It is pretty nice. So what I'm going at is it is very much available anywhere where you go. If we talk about becoming an expat or maybe a refugee, if you have to move, if you move during a disaster, if you move because whatever happened in your country means it's no longer viable for you, whatever the case. But anywhere in the world that allows guns, especially with shotguns, the legislation tends to be quite permissive. If some kind of gun is allowed, it's usually going to be a shotgun and some kind of 22 rifle, something like that. But in general, if at least something is allowed, shotguns will be there. Mostly because it's typically considered like a hunting gun, like a working gun, a farmer's gun, pest control, that sort of thing where, dude, I need this as a tool. I work and I need this thing for pests, for game, for defending the crops from little birds. A number of things for which you just need to have people own a tool, and that tool for farmers and so on is usually going to be a shotgun or a 22 rifle. In countries where it's very restrictive, maybe semi-automatics, carbines and rifles, maybe handguns. Those may be restrictive. This, not so much. So you're likely to find it, and it's usually kind of cheap. And it's very easy to fix and replace bits and parts and this and that. These things make it quite viable as a potential survival gun. Now, here you see it with a combo of the extra barrel. And you will see it in forums and so, oh, this is the best combo ever. It's the most super versatile gun ever. Is it? Well, yes, in many ways it is. It is super versatile in terms of with a shorter barrel, minimal length in US without the proper paperwork for anything shorter, 18.5-inch barrel, sights. So this is your slugger barrel. This is a barrel you use for slugs because you have the sights. And it's quite accurate up to 50 meters, 50 yards, maybe a little bit more. But yeah, it's not going to be super long range. It's not going to be a rifle, but it's going to be stretching nicely compared to just having your bird shot, right? Talking about birdshot, we have the other barrel, which is, yes, longer, but most of all, what it has is it has a choke, meaning it's narrowing down at the end of the barrel. The narrowing down of the end of the barrel, the choke that you have, means that it's going to be grouping all of those smaller projectiles. The birdshot is going to be bunched together and reaching with more authority at further ranges. It's going to be a smaller spread that it has, and it's going to be retaining more speed and power at those longer distances. That's why you have chokes. The more of a choke you have, the more it's compressing and pushing all of those together as they leave the barrel, the further away you reach. And you have different chokes, like it's going to be a medium choke, full choke, cylinder barrel, and there's a more in between. But you will have a choke barrel here. I think that's a full choke, if I remember correctly, or not. Let me know in the comments if you remember. But that is choked and that is cylinder. There is no choke whatsoever. It's just straight walls all to the very end. This is why you use that with your slugs. Can you use slugs on choke barrel? Yeah, up to, I don't know if it's in full choke. So, just better to avoid using choke barrels with slugs, but it can be used at least to some extent. But usually this would be your slugger barrel. It's also going to be the barrel, it's the barrel you use if you're using slugs, a solid projectile for big game hunting, which sounds great in paper, but in general, if you're going to go big game hunting, you rarely go with a slugged shotgun. You probably use a proper bolt action rifle with a scope, something more adequate, but it can be done. But it's also the barrel you use for defense, because this is the barrel you're going to be using for buckshot. Buckshot is the typical ammunition used for hunting as well, but mostly when it comes to self-defense. Buckshot, a number of small projectiles, going to be 8 or 9 of these, 8 or 9 millimeter projectiles. And this is something that compensates a little bit for the lack of, or maybe actually compensates a lot, for the lack of magazine capacity of your shotgun. Your shotgun has, in case you're not familiar, that tube underneath, that's the magazine. And that's where all of these go aligned one after the other, right? So you have capacity of 6, 7, 8. Yeah, usually it's going to be between 5 and 7 with a longer barrel and a longer tube. If I remember, that was 5 plus 1. But it's usually going to be a lot more limited than 9mm semi-automatic pistol or an AR, right? You're talking about something that, as I was saying before, you constantly need to feed in training with these guns. Now, the thing is that with these pump action shotguns, for every one of these that you fire, you need to operate the weapon. You need to pump so as to eject the spent the spent cartridge, the spent shell. You empty that, and when moving it forward, you just push another one right into the chamber, ready to fire. Meaning that each trigger pull, each time you fire, you need to actually do a manipulation of the gun. You need to pump the shotgun every single time. That sounds nice, sounds cool. In video games, it's done automatically, so it is in movies. But when it actually comes to doing it, unless you practice with certain frequency, it may not be as easy as it seems. Yes, it's easy when you're in the range. Not so much when actually someone is trying to rip your head off or someone on top of you struggling for control of that weapon. That is somewhat of a con that the gun has. With proper training, retention techniques, this gun or any other long gun, yeah, you have a good chance of retaining the weapon as you should. With proper training, you will eventually reach a point where muscle memory becomes almost automatic. And there's videos of people that shoot these things as if it's an automatic, right? It is still not. There's still a mechanical movement that needs to be performed. And if you're struggling with someone, or if you're super nervous, and if you're like most people and haven't trained all that much, there is a chance that something could go wrong then. In general, people using a pump action shotgun for self-defense, usually one of these things is all you need to fire. Especially if one of these things happens to be 9 projectiles being fired at the same time. Think about that. That's almost like having a burst of a fully automatic weapon. Even more so because they're all impacting at the same time. It is extremely effective in terms of putting a threat down with somewhat of a proper shot placement in the center of mass. These things just get the job done, and it's a fantastic option when it comes to self-defense. I prefer the semi-automatic version of a shotgun because you just worry about doing this, about pulling. Could things go wrong? Of course. Could you have an interruption of some kind? Sure. I really haven't had in any of my semi-automatic shotguns using proper ammunition in a very long time. I actually cannot think of a single time I've had an interruption with my Benelli in semi-automatic using anything over 30 grams of weight. That is super reliable. That thing is fantastic. But that's an advantage. Here you have to manipulate. And if you have this weapon, you just need to train. Even dry fire training makes a big deal. I explain how to use guns in self-defense and street survival skills. That book is going to be very useful if you haven't had the proper training. But you need to practice. You need to train so as to acquire that muscle memory. So, low magazine capacity, quite a bit of recoil, and it's a bit longer and heavier, but man, is it effective as a self-defense weapon? Yes, it is. Is it better to have an AR? Is it better to have a Glock? Well, if you ask me personally, if I could only own one gun, I'm good with a Glock. Yeah, it's not as powerful as this, but I can defend myself with a Glock. The Glock is the one I've invested the most amount of hours on. It hasn't got the same power as this, right? You will have to shoot 9 times as to have 9 holes instead of just one. But yeah, I think that I'm capable enough with it. Now, the beauty of this is I don't have to choose. I can have both, or 3 or 4. But really, if I have a shotgun, Glock, carbine, I'm fine. It is true that this combo is quite versatile. You can do more things with it. But when it comes to the practical side of things, if you are that much into it, you will probably have different guns for these things instead of having your one gun for everything that you do. But if this is the only thing you have, you are more than well equipped. If you have a pump action shotgun as your only survival gun, you're very good in terms of self-defense, which is the main thing for this. Maybe when it comes to bugging out and keeping that with you, that's maybe something that, yeah, that will kind of suck. But in terms of static, bugging in, defending yourself, you see this with a storm right now in Florida. There's people that are bugging in. This will work fine. There's people that are bugging out, and this may be fine in a truck, in a pickup, right? But if I have to go with floating down the river with something like, with everything in a wet bag of some sort, right? Something like this. If you have to keep everything you own in a bag like this because you're swimming with it, yeah, my Glock will go in there. I'm not taking my shotgun there. Guys, that's going to be all for now. If you like the content of the channel, do consider subscribing and consider getting my books as well. See you next time. Take care.